Will it be a happy reunion for Blackpool Football Club and Neil Critchley? He had a lot of success at Bloomfield Road in his first spell as manager, taking them to promotion from League One in 2021 and steering them to a safe mid-table finish in the Championship the following season. But what followed was an acrimonious exit, and since then Blackpool struggled to relegation. They went down under Michael Appleton, and Stephen Dobbie was unable to keep them up, and the club's gone back to Neil Critchley. So can he rekindle that old spark despite the acrimonious exit, and how that might have affected his relationships at the club? Some interesting dynamics to look at, and whether Blackpool can challenge for promotion from League One once again. Well, to discuss all of this and more, I'm delighted to be joined by part of the Tangerine Army, Rob Walker. How are you, Rob?
Hi, Gab. Very well, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm great, thanks. Really appreciate your time. Looking forward to getting your insight on the Seasiders. Before we get into it, we should also say this is available on YouTube and Spotify. I'm covering all 72 clubs across the EFL between mid-June and mid-July. So if you're watching this on any of those platforms, do give us a subscribe because it helps us out a lot, and check out the other videos once you're done with this one. How are you feeling, Rob, about the Neil Critchley return?
Mixed feelings. I think that was my initial reaction. I think obviously everyone was aware of his abrupt departure at the back end of the previous season, and sort of the departure with no sort of farewell or goodbye. It did leave a bitter taste in a lot of fans' mouths. I think we were thinking probably another positive start to the season after, get to sort of October, November, around sacking season, and potentially a top 6, top 10 club might come sniffing then. But nobody saw the departure coming. The board didn't see it, the fans didn't see it. So when it all happened so quickly, it was just a complete shock. And I think that had a knock-on effect, onto the next season, which obviously turned out to be a complete disaster. So, yeah, initial reaction was not great. But, excuse me, I think if you look at in isolation of who is the best person to get Blackpool back into the Championship, and it has to be Neil Critchley. I think a lot of fans were sort of in the Dobbie camp. Stephen Dobbie, who came in at the back end of the season as a caretaker, managed 6 games and got 3 wins. So, it's a pretty good record for a relegated team. He always conducts himself well in interviews. He's got a good rapport with the players, and he did a very good job. So I could see the link there. But for me, I think Critchley's got the experience at League One level. He knows the players. I think there's only, before the signings this summer, I think apart from 3 players in the squad, he knew them all. I think there's only Tom Tribal, Dom Thompson and Andy Lyons who hadn't played for him previously. And even Andy Lyons, he was linked with us under Critchley. So, I think Critchley was aware of what he could do. So only 2 players really who he's not worked with before. So I think when you look at it as a whole, I think it's the right decision. Although I do think it will take some fans time to be completely won over. And I think that will sort of depend on how we start next season.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you'd appointed Dobbie, you'd have probably ended up giving him the sock. That's a Harry Potter reference. But I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because the board, the chairman Simon Sadler said that when Neil Critchley returned, that he tried as hard as possible to find someone other than Neil Critchley, and he was half joking, but I also kind of believe him because he did feel a little bit unsure about it, given the dynamics of what had gone before and the circumstances of the way Neil left. But I also feel like there's possibly a willingness from the Tangerine Army to sort of put that in the past and leave that in the past and kind of look forward. And it feels like that's the majority that are just willing to get behind him again.
Yeah, I thought he spoke very well. He did like a 40-minute Red Lancashire interview. And quite a lot of that time was spoken about his departure. And I thought he answered the questions really well. He acknowledged that he would have done things differently this time around. Certain things he said he couldn't do, which I was a bit bemused by. I'm not quite sure what he wasn't allowed to do. But no, I think he put the issues to bed, and I think majority of fan base are behind him. I think we've sold 7,000 season tickets, which is a decent effort in League One.
Yeah,
I think in the Championship we'd sold just under 9,000. So it's not a massive drop off considering we've got relegated. So no, I do think I think majority of fans will forget about that. I just think the slight worry is that if we do start poorly like we did with Critchley in the first spell, he won't be afforded the same time, and that's just a slight concern I do have. But I do think, looking at the rapport with the manager, I do think it's a completely different situation to Appleton. Obviously, Appleton was appointed and the fans, were up in arms, not happy. But the fans aren't happy with Critchley, not because he left, because he was so popular. The fans absolutely loved him and just felt a little bit hurt by it. So it's a completely different scenario. So, yeah, I do think he spoke very well since he's come back. Obviously, we started to make some signings now. There's a bit more positive feel around the place. So, yeah, we're looking forward to the start of the season.
Yeah, I think it's fair for me to say right now that you're in the best position of the three clubs coming down. How do you feel the squad's coming together?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point you make about the three relegated teams. I do think that on paper, with Reading and Wigan's off the field troubles, we are in a better position. I think our signings so far, we've made 4 signings so far. So we've signed keeper Richard O'Donnell. From Rochdale, who obviously on paper it doesn't sound like the most exciting of signs, but I think it's probably competition for Daniel Grimshaw and probably a backup.
I'd expect him to be backup. I think Richard O'Donnell's a good solid backup, and I think if Grimshaw gets injured or if you come to a point where you need a steady pair of hands, I think Richard O'Donnell can provide that because he's a good shot stopper. But I think you're right to make the point that Grimshaw, because let's not forget, Grimshaw was the goalkeeper a lot of Blackpool fans wanted to see start, and I think Mick McCarthy and maybe Michael Appleton seemed to go for Chris Maxwell. But Grimshaw's a really talented goalkeeper, isn't he?
Definitely. Now, in Critchley's season in the Championship, Daniel Grimshaw was one of our standout performers. He actually started the last season and then got dropped, I thought, a bit unfairly. And then Chris Maxwell came in and didn't do any better, but somehow kept his place. So I think Grimshaw's confidence probably took a bit of a beating, but Critchley's back now, so I think he knows what Grimshaw can do. He likes to play out with his feet. He's a confident goalkeeper, probably from his Man City background. So, for League One, Daniel Grimshaw is more than capable. I mean, some people are saying he may still leave, but I don't think so. I think he's got a long-term contract. He needs games under his belt. He needs another good season playing first-team football. So, yeah, I think having Grimshaw and O'Donnell, I think that's a good combination. I've seen the comments from the Rochdale fans, and obviously their season ended in relegation as well, but it wasn't down to O'Donnell. I think he was one of their standout performers. So, for a keeper, early 30s, that's no age, is it? They're in the peak still then. So, I think it's a good signing. We've also signed Matthew Pennington from Shrewsbury Town on a Bosman. And again, Shrewsbury fans spoke very highly of him. He had 2 years there. And I think he won Players' Play of the Year last season. He's only 28 years old, so he's got experience, but he's at a good age as well. So I think that's a good signing, personally.
Yeah, the one thing I would raise with Matt Pennington is that he's tended to play, I would say, his best football on the right of a back three. And I don't know how applicable this would be to his more recent years, but I've sometimes found him a little bit dual avoidant, if you like, where he likes to intercept the ball, but I don't necessarily see him as someone who's going to be super aggressive. And I don't think that's much of a problem when you're playing in a back three because you've got other centre backs there. But as part of a back four, that's a little bit of a concern that I would have, especially given how front foot Neil Critchley likes to play. So that would be a slight reservation that I would have. But he's played well in League One before, so obviously he's got that pedigree.
Yeah, I'm not sure how Critchley's going to go, whether he's going to go for a 4-4-2 like he did on the majority of his time at the club, or whether he'll go for sort of 5-3-2 or 5-2-3. We'll have to wait and see. But no, I'm pretty positive about it. And then we've also signed 2 centre midfielders in Albie Morgan and Ollie Norburn. I don't know much about either, to be honest with you. I know Norburn is someone who we've been after for probably 2 years now. He was linked with us under Critchley's first spell, I think, and it never happened for whatever reason. I think we had a couple of bids rejected. Peterborough were quite keen to keep hold of him. But I do know he was very keen to relocate back up to the northwest. So that deal's now happened. So I think he's definitely, out of the 4 signings, he's the one that it might not look on paper as a wow signing, but I think for Blackpool, we need that leader in midfield. Yeah. And I think we've desperately missed that last season with Kevin Stewart, Liam Bridcut, all injured, for all season. So our midfield was pretty weak. It was a lot of offensive players, not much cover, sort of shielding the back four and goalkeeper, which showed in our results. So I think him coming in is a massive boost. And again, Posh fans, although they were a bit unhappy about him wanting to leave, they begrudgingly said that he was one of the better players last season.
Yeah, definitely.
So again, I think that's a positive one. Albie Morgan, I've read some mixed reviews from Charlton fans. Some are saying that his agents played a blinder. Some are saying that there is a footballer in there who is a good passer of the ball. So maybe Critchley sees something there that he can work with. We have got a lot of numbers in midfield now, obviously signing those two players. We've got Matty Virtue back from Lincoln. We've still got Sonny Carey. We've got Kenny Dougal. And there's rumours that Kevin Stewart's still training with the club, trying to get a move back. So there's a lot of numbers in there. Callum Connolly can also play centre mid. So it'll be interesting to see how the midfield looks next season.
Yeah, I think I really like the signing of Ollie Norburn. I think he's a super energetic midfielder, and I think he did really well because midfield was a strong point of Peterborough last season. They had a lad called Jindo Fuchs who they got from north of the border, who they were expecting to be their first choice, and they had a lot of Jack Taylor, lots of really good midfielders. So I think for Ollie Norburn to have broken his way in, I think he did a lot to be able to do that. And I think he's going to fit into the way Neil Critchley likes to play. I'm not convinced that Albie Morgan personally is much more than a mid-table League One midfielder. So that's the one I would have some reservations over. But like you say, you've got lots of competition there. So it's going to be a lot of competition for places.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sort of defensively and centre midfield now, we look fairly strong. For League One, I think work to do in the wide areas. I think we've only got CJ Hamilton and Owen Dale on the books still. And obviously, Owen Dale was at Portsmouth last season, so it's whether he'll stay with us this season. And obviously, up front, we've released Guy Medine. Jake Beasley was injured for most of last season. Shane Lavery picked up a lot of injuries. And obviously, the big question mark for Blackpool fans is Jerry Yates, whether he'll stay, whether he'll go. I think the club are trying to hold out for around £4 million, which, I think it's probably more likely he will leave than stay, but obviously he's got
4 million seems like a lot though, Rob, doesn't it?
It does, and I'm sort of I'm on the fence with Jerry Yates. Obviously his work rate is unquestionable. The guy works. You won't find a more hardworking centre forward than Jerry Yates. I'm playing in a team that's struggling. He runs every channel. His work rate is unbelievable. He had a spell last season, sort of, I think, from November to beginning of March, where I don't think he scored a goal, and he looks a player devoid of confidence. I can remember Bristol City away on live on Sky, where we had to win that game 0-0, clean through, and he fluffed his lines, and Blackpool went on to lose 2-0, I think. So he had spells where he looked a world beater, he had spells where he looked League Two. So, but he's still 25, 26. He has scored goals in a struggling team. He's got a year plus an option, so he's got 2 years left on his contract. So Blackpool aren't in a rush to sell him. And I think if we don't get the offer that we want, I think he will stay. And then the club will look at it again next season, depending on what division we're in next season. So I suppose a lot of our transfer business moving forward will depend on whether he stays, because obviously if we do get a decent fee for him, then you imagine that will be reinvested, or part of it reinvested back into the squad for the wide areas and replacing Yates and Medine.
Yeah, I mean, talking of options up top, Shane Lavery's still there, isn't he?
Yeah, Shane Lavery's still there. Yeah, he had a very injury-prone season as well. He played a few games, got injured. He didn't play back end of last season, but he did play for Northern Ireland in the recent internationals. He's a funny one, Shane Lavery, because when he first signed, I thought he looked a very good player. And then first season, he had a bad injury against Blackburn Rovers and just never quite looked the same player. He seemed to lose half a yard of pace. And he was in and out of the team. And I think even Appleton has played him out wide, which that's not his strength. Yeah. His strength is running in behind through the centre. So again, for League One, if we can get him fit and he can play, 25, 30 games, then I think he will score goals. But that remains to be seen.
Yeah, for sure. So there's a bit of sort of controversy around the ownership of Blackpool at the moment. Nowhere near as much as it was, I hasten to add, under the previous ownership. But I think there's, I suppose you could argue to an extent that the biggest strength that Simon Sadler has had is not being the ownership regime that's gone before. But I also think that if I'm in Simon Sadler's shoes, I would maybe look at it and say, in 4 seasons at the club, I've overseen 2 incredibly, or 5 seasons now, actually, maybe. I've overseen 2 that were incredibly successful. Do you think, where are you on Simon Sadler's ownership?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think he's made a lot of good decisions. I think he's made a lot of poor decisions. I mean, if you look at his managerial appointments, you had Simon Grayson, who came back in for a second spell, and it wasn't good. Obviously, we've got Critchley, which was the standout one, and then we've obviously had Michael Appleton, Mick McCarthy, which were pretty disastrous, to be honest with you. So there's been a lot of things going on around the club. I mean, Ben Mansford, who was the CEO, he left, who was sort of the reason why Appleton came in, because he was his friend and agent when he was at Portsmouth. So I think Sadler was sort of not pushed into it, but I think heavily led by Mansford to appoint Appleton.
Right.
And then we also had the sporting director who came from Coventry, Chris Badlan, who was meant to be sort of a very good appointment, and then he left quite abruptly. There was rumours that he was leaking team news, he was acting unprofessionally, so that ended quite acrimoniously after only several months. So the club have had to go back this season, have had to go back to basics and start again. Obviously, with appointing Critchley, we've now got David Downs in from Sheffield Wednesday, who's coming as, I think, sporting director, but has got an academy background. His friend Brett Garrity was on the board. He's also left. I think he was getting a bit of a stick as well from the fans. He's stepped down. So
what role was he? Sorry,
Brett Garrity was on the board, so he was
okay.
advising the chairman. So it's a complete reset, and I think obviously we're trying to get the training ground and the East Stand developed. That's stalled. So yeah, there are issues there, but Simon Sadler, he's come in. He has spent money on the club, especially in League One. That first season under Critchley, when it was COVID, there was quite a lot of recruitment spent, to get us into the Championship at the first attempt. And I just think it was a combination of poor decisions when Critchley left. Getting Appleton in it wasn't. I can't overemphasise what a bad decision that was. It just
and the four-year contract as well.
Yeah, I mean, I always said that situation, it was never going to end well. It would only take a few results for it to go sour. And he started off okay, but you need to have a relationship there with the fan base. And I get some fans like certain managers, some fans don't like certain managers, but when you've got 99% of the fan base against the manager from day one, it's never going to work. And Appleton obviously had Preston connections. He left the club after a short spell the first time. He never conducts himself the most, he was quite a reserved character and quite the opposite to Neil Critchley. So it ended in disaster. And then getting Mick McCarthy in was just as bad, really. I mean, I could see the logic behind it, but Blackpool's physical presence wasn't there. We've got a team, quite a small team, and it just didn't suit the McCarthy way. So it was just a wrong appointment.
Do you know what, Rob? I think it's so important that when clubs make appointments, they factor in the sort of culture of the fan base, because I think Michael Appleton, and I don't actually see this as a diss on Appleton. I think it's just a stylistic thing. He's not someone who's going to make loads of effort to really engage the fans. I see a similar thing with Paul Tisdale, for example. Both Appleton and Paul Tisdale in their careers are incredibly process-driven managers, and at different clubs they've been hugely successful through that. But they've been most successful in Appleton's case it was Oxford, in Tisdale's case it was Exeter City, and I think both those clubs have a culture where it's a relatively well-off area, and I don't think fans necessarily live and die by the football club in quite the same way or by quite the same volume that you do in Blackpool, for example, where the football club is absolutely everything to the town. And I think it's really important for that kind of football club that you actually have a manager that really gets it and understands the passion and really engages with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Appleton thought that because he was working on the previous regime that he would come in this second time and everything would be fine, and that just wasn't the case. Quite a lot of poor decisions by Sadler, but hopefully the Critchley appointment is a step in the right direction. And obviously the club are working hard to get things right off the pitch as well. So it'll be interesting to see how they develop over the next 12 months. I know the application for training ground was going in, the stand funding, which I think was partly privately funded bid. So there are steps there, and hopefully they can start taking shape as well.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of taking shape, how's the squad looking, Rob? And how close do you think you are to having a starting 11 that can play the opening game of the season?
Yeah, I think if you look at our squad on paper, for League One, I think it's a very good League One squad. I think a lot of them players, obviously, were here under Critchley in the first spell and did a very good job. And I think maybe one or two of them got found out in the Championship. But I do think League One, I think you've got players like James Husband, you've got players like Kenny Dougal, CJ Hamilton, Jerry Yates, Marvin Ekpateta. Look at the fullbacks, Jordan Gabriel and Andy Lyons. I mean, Jordan Gabriel was linked with Burnley only 12 months ago. Andy Lyons has come in from Ireland, and he's been the one positive of last season. I think he scored 4 or 5 goals from fullback in January. Yeah. So he's one who could be one to watch out for next season. So there is a lot of there's a lot of depth there. I mean, Sonny Carey, I think he's shown in spells that he's a very good player. And I think the drop to League One will do him a world of good as well. So.
He's let's talk about Sonny Carey, Rob, because he seems like quite a creative player that likes to sort of drift in from the right-hand side and then maybe have a shot with his left foot or try and create that way. But if you've got runners around him, like someone like Shane Lavery, who, if he has a good, strong pre-season, he can offer that pace in behind, that could be an interesting dynamic to look at as well.
Yeah, I feel a bit sorry for Sonny Carey because I don't think he was utilised well last season. He was playing in a 4-4-2 with Charlie Patino, and I think it was actually Appleton's last match. It was Watford away. We played 4-4-2. We played Carey and Patino, and I just said to my friend, I said, they'll counter attack us and they'll score, and that's what happened from a corner. Blackpool pushed up. I think it was Ismail Sarr used his pace, and you can see Carey and Patino trying to run back, and that's not Carey's game. He's not a defensive-minded player. He's more of a number 10, sort of behind the attacker. So, like you say, pockets of space. He's quite an intelligent player. Likes to have a shot from long range. So, if Critch can get the best out of him, then I think he could have a very good season.
Does he have the fitness, though, to fit into what Critchley wants from his sides? Because if we look at the template that got Blackpool up under Neil Critchley last time, it's a very high-pressing template, which obviously involves lots of energy, lots of tenacity. Can Sonny Carey offer that? Can he add that side to his game?
I think he can. I think when we were playing 4-3-3, he was playing sort of the furthest advance of the three. So he might have had Kevin Stewart and had a Kenny Dougal next to him when we were in the Championship, or Ryan Wintle from Cardiff on loan. He was a great signing for us that season. So I think he can. I think he did play quite a lot of games last season. He was one of the few players who didn't get injured a lot last season. So I think he's proven that he can sort of play Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday, Wednesday. I think he's only 22, 23 still, so he's still a good age. So yeah, I'm hopeful he can have a good season.
Yeah, for sure. I think we touched on Kenny Dougal there, Rob. He's obviously thrived under Neil Critchley before. Are you hoping that you can keep him, fully fit for next season?
Yeah, it was a funny one. I think Kenny Dougal's option was his contract was up at the end of the season just gone, and he had a year's option. I think a lot of people expected him to be released. Critchley was only appointed after the retain list came out, and Dougal's option was exercised. And one of the questions was whether Critchley had any input into the retain list. He sort of played it down, but I have a feeling that he did have some say in it, maybe not the final say. And I think Kenny Dougal's a player where you're in League One. He's 29, 30 years old. He's a good age. You know what you're going to get with Kenny Dougal. He's not going to set the world alight, although obviously playoff final, he did. But I think, again, he's a confidence player. I think his confidence got a bit drained last season. He got dropped from the Australian squad before the World Cup. He didn't make the squad, which was a bitter blow for himself. And he was in and out of the team. I think Luis Fiorini started a lot of games early doors before he got injured. And then when we got to January, Mick McCarthy didn't seem to fancy him that much. So, yeah, he's a player who Critchley knows his strengths. He knows what he can do. And if he's got someone like Ollie Norburn next to him, then again, that could prove a fruitful partnership.
Yeah, I'm looking through the midfield options now. Matty Virtue had a decent season last season at Lincoln. Kenny Dougal, we know what he can do at this level. There's lots of players that you'd put in that bracket. Albie Morgan, you've added as well. Ollie Norburn, I think, is a great signing. So the midfield looks strong. So I wanted to come on to the defence. You obviously loaned out Doug Tharm last season to Accrington Stanley, and he's, I know, someone who's got a really good long throw on him. Whether you're going to look to try and bring that into the equation as well.
Yeah, I think he had a bit of a mixed spell, should we say, at Accrington. I think he started off quite well. I think he got injured and came back in. I think he was in and out of the team a little bit. Obviously, Accrington got relegated as well. Sure. So possibly, I think the one that's more interesting is Oliver Casey. Oliver Casey was on loan at Forest Green, and I know Forest Green got relegated as well. I think he won either the Fans Player of the Year or the Players Player of the Year. So he came from Leeds United on a decent fee, played in their under-23 team. So he was a player who needed a year's experience, first team football. So remains to be seen whether Thorman and Casey get a chance next season. Obviously, we've still got Marvin Ekpiteta. We've got James Husband, who I'm not sure whether we'll play centre back or play left back, because we've let Reece James go back to Sheffield Wednesday. So in terms of left hand side, we've only really got Dom Thompson as a left back. So we'll see what happens with Husband. But also we've got Pennington, who we've signed as well, and we've also got Callum Connolly, who can play there. So again, I think our defensive options with Lyons and Gabriel on the right hand side is pretty strong. I think it's more in the forward areas that I think we are still quite light. But defensively, I think with Pennington signing, it's looking a lot better than it did before Critchley came in.
I'm glad you mentioned Callum Connolly there, Rob, because I think he's an excellent player at this level. I think he's incredibly energetic, decent on the ball, just such a good all-rounder, someone who's got a little bit of everything to his game, and so versatile as well, can play midfield, can play centre-back, can play right-back. That versatility is going to be huge. I think he's pretty much a guaranteed, or as close as you can get to a guaranteed, top 6 performer at this level.
Yeah, I feel a bit sorry for Connolly because he has played so many positions with Blackpool. Obviously, we had that issue at right back a couple of years ago where we hadn't signed one and he played out there. He's played in the centre midfield, like you say. I think when he was at Fleetwood, he played primarily at centre back in a back three, I think. So he's very versatile. He's not the tallest, but he's a bit like Jerry Yates. He leaves everything on the pitch. He's quite a vocal member of the squad. We haven't got many of those, so he's going to be vital next season. So I think whichever formation and whichever system we go for, I do think Connolly will be thereabouts. Again, he's a player who Critchley knows well. He does like to pop up with the odd goal as well. So yeah, again, another player who, when you've got 46 game season, you've got LDV Vans or Pizza Cup, whatever it's called, you've got a lot of games of football. Players like Connolly are going to be invaluable.
Yeah, well, let's hope that's the case. I feel like the way Critchley plays requires a lot of energy from the front players. We've touched on Shane Lavery. We've also talked about Jerry Yates, but I wonder if there's any of the forwards that are coming through, like Brad Holmes, like Jake Daniels, and I think Rob Apter can play an attacking position as well. Are they players who might get a look in under Critchley in pre-season?
I think possibly out of the three, I think probably Rob Apter's the most likely. Apter had a spell at Scunthorpe last season, and although Scunthorpe themselves struggled, I think he was a shining star in their team. He played, I think, out wide left of the front three. He's quite a small, nimble player, but very quick, very direct. So he had rave reviews from Scunthorpe. So yeah, I think the drop to League One will give potentially players like Apter and Holmes a chance to certainly be involved around the first team squad. And obviously, we're not signing many forward players at the moment, and they probably are going to get a chance in pre-season. So it's a great opportunity for him to sort of, make Critchley stand up and say, "Oh, hang on, we might have a player here." Brad Holmes is, is quite a physical striker, sort of 6'1". He has had loan spells in sort of the National League and National League North. Hasn't really set the world alight, but for our under 23s, he has been a regular goal scorer. So again, there is a player in there, but it might be a season too soon for him. It might be another loan spell, maybe down to the National League, that will do him the world of good. But at the moment, yeah, we are short up top. So players like Holmes, Apter, and Daniels will probably get a chance.
How many more additions do you think you need then, Rob, between now and the end of the window?
Oh, that's a good question. I think certainly half a dozen. I think 5 or 6. I think certain wide areas we haven't really got any sort of right hand side to speak of. I think CJ Hamilton likes to play on the left hand side. Dale can play on the right, but's played on the left. And it remains to be seen if Dale stays. I think it's a big question mark for me whether he stays or not.
He's flattered to deceive the last couple of years, Owen Dale. Had a really good 2021 season with Crewe Alexandra. We saw then that he's strong, he's quick, he's direct. But I think, and from my own understanding of Owen Dale and the various challenges that he's faced off the pitch, I think he has had one or two difficulties perhaps that have maybe influence how his sort of concentration and focus and things like that might have made things a little bit difficult for him to fulfill his potential. I suppose you'd be hoping that with Critchley's coaching and management qualities, maybe we can see the best out of Owendale.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I mean, I saw him. He played for Blackpool at Barnsley away, and he scored a great individual goal. I think he took on a couple of players and with a really smart finish into the corner. So he has shown glimpses, but I think when you look at what Portsmouth fans have said, pretty much what you've said, very hit and miss. I think his end product has been a little bit lacking on occasions. But Critchley obviously brought him to the club. He knows the crew connections. So I'm hopeful that they will be given a chance, because I think we're so short of options that I think unless we've got ready replacements coming in, then I don't think he'll go anytime soon. One player we have been linked with recently is a striker, is Chris Martin, who was at QPR last season, and sort of he looks like if you're going to say who's going to replace Gary Medine, then someone like Chris Martin will be the obvious candidate. I think QPR may still offer him a short-term deal, but he might get lesser wage at Blackpool, but maybe a longer-term contract. So that will be mentioned. And I think he will be, for League One, I think Chris Martin will be a very good signing.
He's a very good chest feet target man, Chris Martin. I think because he's quite tall and reasonably good in the air, people sort of think he's a battering ram, but really he's actually got quite a delicate touch. He's 6'2", but in terms of that ability to control the ball in really tight, crowded penalty areas and get it to the right place, I think he's very good at that. So if you compare him with a bit of raw pace, a bit of exuberance and runners off him, I think there is that opportunity, like even a layoff for someone like Sonny Carey to have a pop, or flick it on for Shane Lavery and things like that. I think that could be an opportunity, as long as he has the work rate to fit into Neil Critchley's demands as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing I've not mentioned is the use of the loan market. I think the loan market is going to be key for Blackpool, because last season Appleton's sort of opening comments were about how well he's utilised the loan market in the past, with like Brennan Johnson and Morgan Rogers at Lincoln, and he came in and the players we signed on paper, looked good, and in spells looked good. It wasn't really a success. I think Morgan Rogers towards the end of the season, had good games, but Lewis Fiorini was out injured most of the season, although he looks a good player when he did play.
Yeah.
Charlie Patino started off well but faded, and I felt a bit sorry for him in a struggling team. He was playing every week, and he's a 19-year-old lad, and there wasn't much help around him. We signed Reece Williams from Liverpool, who was no better than Jordan Thornley and Marvin Ekpiteta. We signed Ian
Ekpiteta, actually, Rob. He was really influential in those two successful seasons that we've talked about for Blackpool. Any chance that he sort of repeats that sort of form?
Well, hopefully, because in that championship season, he was player of the season. Even above players like Josh Bowler. Ekpiteta swept all the awards. He was absolutely superb that season. We actually signed him to a new contract, so this is his option season now. So he's only got 1 year left. But yeah, poor season last year. He was mistake ridden. I think he got sent off a couple of times. There was a handball at Wigan away, which was very costly. And his confidence seemed to go. But I do think the midfield was a massive contributing factor. I think there was absolutely no shield in front of him. So
no stability.
Players like Chris Maxwell and Ekpiteta were just, it was like the Alamo. We were just getting absolutely battered with teams pressing, and we had no shield there, no Kevin Stewart, to sort of steady the ship.
Do you know what? I think it's really interesting you mentioned that, because I also feel like that was probably part of the reason why some of the other players, like Charlie Patino, for instance, and maybe some of the wide players that we've talked about, Sonny Carey, maybe that was part of the reason why they struggled, because when Mick McCarthy came in, you're almost asking everyone to put in a defensive shift, and that almost limits some of the more creative or higher quality players. Whereas if you have got someone who can provide that stability in midfield, it actually frees up some of your more flair players to actually show what they can do.
Definitely. I think I've said this before. Critchley's biggest strength is off the ball, so he knows how to set a team up. And obviously in the Championship, Blackpool were going to go large spells without the ball, so that was the big strength of Critchley. He knew how to set teams up, and Ekpiteta was, like I say, he was our star player that Championship season. So obviously we'll be hopefully more on the offensive in this season in League One. But Ekpiteta is going to be huge for us, and I hope he stays, because he has been linked with Barnsley. Although I think that would be a bit of a sideways step. I think he's been linked with Barnsley to replace Mads Anderson, who's gone to Luton. But I don't really see that. I think he would a bit of a sideways step going to Barnsley. I think he'd be best staying here for another season. Then he may move on in the summer. But he's a huge player. I think you've mentioned Pennington. I think he could complement Pennington quite well, because Ekpiteta does get his head in there. He's he's quite physical but athletic defender. So potentially
like a Vidic Ferdinand kind of.
Yeah, hopefully, that'd be nice.
League One equivalent, of course.
Yeah, definitely, that'd be nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's hope that's the case. Rob, I've got to make my 1 to 24 predictions in a few weeks, and I'm struggling a little bit in League One, because I think there's 2 or 3 teams that I'm happy to say will definitely be in the top 6 somewhere. But the rest of that, I think, is going to be a bit of a free for all. So I need a bit of guidance from you with a couple of questions. Really, the first would be, what would be the reason to be massively behind Blackpool and say they could put together a serious promotion bid this season?
I think it's the fact that the squad's worked with Critchley before. I think that's is a massive factor, that most of those players, he knows them, and they've got League One experience. They've done it before. Especially if Jerry Yates stays, then I do think we can go up. I think if he goes and we don't get the right replacement, then it could be a bit more of a struggle. But you like to think Jerry Yates could get 20 goals in League One, and other players chipping in with a few goals. So I don't think we're far off. I think we are short at the moment, but I think 2 or 3 quality signings in the forward areas, then I think we've got a very, very good League One squad.
And then what would be the reason, Rob, to say, excuse me, actually this could be a bit of a disappointing season and maybe we might underwhelm a little bit?
I think it's Neil Critchley again. I think if we start poorly, I think if we don't gel early doors, I think the pressure will be on. I think the fans will, unfortunately, turn quite quickly, because fans don't forget, do they? The most fickle bunch. If things go well, we're doing the fist pumps with Critchley in the South Stand. If things start off slowly, then I think the knives will be out.
Fans don't forget if the results aren't there.
Absolutely. And obviously that happened under Appleton. So it's different circumstances, but could be the same result. So, I think we have to start well. And obviously the fixture list has come out, and I'm not being disrespectful to any of the teams early doors, but it looks on paper, famous last words, it looks an okay-ish start for us.
Sure.
But yeah, we have to start well. That's the key. And if we start well, then I think we can go on to have a good season.
Well, hopefully that's the case. Listen, Rob, it's been such a pleasure to chat about Blackpool with you this afternoon. Thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate it. This has been EFL Debate, the Blackpool Summer Deep Dive with Rob Walker, and we'll see you again very soon.